Hello, I'm Eric Snodgrass, and thank you for watching this in-depth ag forecast brought to you by Nutrien Ag Solutions. Well, over the last 7 days, we've had some very heavy rainfall that has moved through the United States. And what you're looking at here is through 12 a.m. this morning, a 7-day total precipitation map. We had, of course, Tropical Storm Fred that eventually went up here into the northeast, and then Henri, which eventually turned and came into the northeast as well, adding to the flooding problems we've seen there. We had that stalled out frontal boundary that stuck right back in through here, on which we saw heavy rainfall that stretched from parts of the Mid-South back to parts of central and southern Texas and through the Appalachian Mountains. That's been kind of a focal point for a lot of this heavy rainfall. We've had, for the first time in a very long time, precipitation getting into parts of Montana, Wyoming, into the northern plains and upper Midwest. We're going to talk about that more in just a few moments. But you just notice that there are several locations on this map where we saw values that were greater than 6 inches of rainfall inside of a week. And I know a lot of news coverage lately has been devoted to the storms that have gone right here through parts of Middle Tennessee. Now, I got asked a question about these storms over the weekend, actually on Sunday, where we saw in some places near Centerville, which is just to the west of Nashville, rainfall totals by a CoCoRaHS station over 18 inches. And the question I got from a grower was, how well was this predicted? So I'd kind of like to show you what the modeling capability is so we can understand this for the future. Now, in the United States, we run our flagship model called the GFS, and I put V16 on this so that you know that it's the version 16. And this is what the forecast was released on Friday night through 7 a.m. on Sunday. Now, what you notice is that the models had picked up on the system curling out of the Dakotas. Frontal boundary stretched through here, and there was still a lingering frontal boundary in place here. This was Grace, and this was Henri. All right. Now, you do see that the models had picked up on the possibility for storms here. And even in my reports on Friday, I said, watch out through the Mid-South. We do have the potential for some pretty heavy rain there. But no indication from the GFS, not that we should expect it to get this right, but no indication that we should be seeing, rainfall totals topping 5 inches, let alone 18. So what about the European? I often prefer it. If you notice, I go back and forth, very similar forecasts in the near term. But still, that same area. Did the European model say, there's a high probability of such extreme precipitation? It did not. I just want to make a point here. These models are not designed to do that. They're too low a resolution to kind of capture that cloud scale interaction, which is what we tend to get when we see such intense convection. They will not be able to do this. The time of year when they tend to do the best on predicting heavy rainfall events tend to either come from hurricanes in the fall, or they do much better with the cold season precipitation type forecasting, so fall and winter and spring. But we're not done yet. The National Weather Service releases a product, and this is what it showed. Now, they had, by Friday night, identified this region as possibly having storms capable of putting down, in a narrow corridor here, some heavy rain. But as you can see from the coloring, we were talking about 1.5 to maybe upwards of 3 inches of rain. So this is how the National Weather Service uses all of the different models plus their forecasting talent to find those areas. So clearly a much more refined forecast, which is why I show you that WPC product quite a bit. But then we're going to look at one of our high-resolution models, one that's capable of capturing the thunderstorm interaction. And from the Friday evening model run, it's called the 0Z Saturday run, the 36-hour forecast did find that narrow corridor over which we expected to see those bigger storms. Now, the NAM model does at times kind of over-convect and produce too much precipitation, and that's just a limitation of the model. Yet it is still, all of these models are still fantastic. But you saw that it did grab an area in through here. I need to enlarge my numbers over here. Sorry about that, but it did find that corridor in through there had the potential for some for some big storms and big rainfall coming out of them as they kind of trained one over the other. But the illustration I'm trying to show you here is that our modeling isn't perfect. We make improvements on it all the time, and some of the smartest people on the face of the earth are working to build these models, and we should be thankful that we even have something this close to being able to capture what the future reality is going to be. But that's the nature of trying to predict something like a massive flooding event like you saw right here in parts of Middle Tennessee. That was a very, very challenging event, and those thunderstorms trained, which means they followed one another, and as a result produced such incredibly heavy rainfall, which has resulted, at least last time I checked early this morning, in at least 20 fatalities. So this has been a substantial event here that we've seen. And by the way, that's the second time near Nashville we flooded this year. We flooded back in the spring in this area as well. So where are we today? Well, this is our latest satellite imagery here from GOES 16. If I just kind of rock back and forth late in the afternoon, a couple of very interesting things to kind of show you, and maybe why it's so difficult to do that kind of thunderstorm forecasting. Now, if we just play out the bigger picture here, we've got what's left of Henri. We have a stalled out boundary in through here that comes back right along the Gulf Coast. You can even see part of this kind of seems to extend into parts of the Mid-South where the heat is on today. You can see the smoke from the wildfires in the west as well. But some of these storms, as you see them kind of moving across Illinois, in fact, I got a little bit of time. Let's go and just take a quick look at those, okay? These storms that are in this particular area, notice that they put down their own outflow. See the outflow right in through there, on which new storms tend to form. A lot of scattered storms in this part of Missouri to Arkansas, and some heavier rain, even some hail out of the storm that just went south of where my parents live in Springfield, Illinois. But this just kind of points out the challenges we have in trying to predict that. So good question is, did the morning model runs see this? So let's just go take a look at it. Storm Prediction Center had identified this as being the big area we're going to watch later today for the risk of severe storms, but they had identified this pocket right in through here of having a risk as well. So Storm Prediction Center has been on top of this. And did the models find it? Well, this would be the 12Z run from the NAM model. And they captured this frontal boundary. We kind of walk through here that was moving through northern Illinois. It did extend farther to the east. Some of the models really just didn't pick up on that. But it did find that one storm there. I was quite impressed. But then as we get toward afternoon, the cluster of storms that's in this area didn't ever line out. And maybe that's one of the challenges that the NAM model struggles with, is seeing how storms take on their type, be it single-celled or multi-celled or linear features like squall lines. And oftentimes I find it tends to put everything into a big, long squall line. But through 5 o'clock this afternoon, I'm seeing the storms cutting through the Mid-South, down here on that stalled out boundary, and the scattered storms in the Northeast, plus what's blowing up in the high plains, getting into the mountains. Did a pretty good job on this. Now, what we're going to watch in the overnight hours is what's going to be happening right in here. And I know it doesn't look like much, but that's an area that we're going to keep an eye on later on today. Okay. Now, as we go through the overnight hours, you'll see that the models tomorrow in the morning are attempting to have some sort of possibly set of thunderstorms that sit on top of the boundary layer. That means they're elevated. They're not tapping into surface moisture or surface features. It's really the upper level features. We could be stormy through Minnesota, Wisconsin, into northern Illinois through early in the morning tomorrow. We'll have to watch it on radar to see how it pans out. And then we're going to get through the day tomorrow. This is now working our way through Tuesday evening and now getting out here to Wednesday. And we notice that the model is really, by the time we get out there Wednesday, attempting to put down, a big squall line feature. But as I told you, the NAM model tends to do that quite a bit. It tends to line out these features and produce large squall lines that kind of move across big sections here, in this case, the Great Lakes states. We're just going to watch. We'll have to keep a very close eye on this area and watch the trends in these models. And by the way, if you subscribe to my morning newsletter, I give you links to all of this so you can watch it at any time that you'd like. So we'll keep a close eye on that. Storm Prediction Center, if I kind of shrink this back out, you can see they're clued into it as well for tomorrow. They've given it a marginal risk, but they're going to watch this very closely too. Now, to flip our discussion over to what's going on in the tropics, I want to show you the latest update here from this afternoon. In fact, let's just see if we got any new updates. 2 p.m. Eastern Daylight Time is the latest we've got. Now, since this morning, they've upgraded all these areas. This is now 40% chance of developing here as it moves toward the Yucatan. We have a system, this is quite interesting, that's moving in this direction, got a 40% chance, and then a new wave that came off of Africa. But this one's really chewing on a lot of very, very dry, dusty air. But all three of them at 40%, and this is the remnants of Henri still here, and we saw that on satellite. So speaking of satellite, I would like to show you the visible satellite animation from earlier today. So I'm going backward in time. So this is sunrise through sunset. So what we do notice, if I just kind of leave it here, is that most of these systems are quite disorganized. In other words, we see clusters of tropical storms or disturbances, but no real indication of, a well-defined developing system. And notice right here, all of the Saharan dust that is coming off to this part of the Atlantic. Now, what I'm going to be watching most carefully is what you've got right in through here. And with time, as this moves toward the Yucatan Peninsula, what that could possibly do. Because using some of our other tools like the European model, looking here at the probability of tropical depression development, what I'm most concerned about is this area right in through here. because should something get into the Gulf and then get turned by the steering currents more toward Texas or Louisiana rather than over toward Mexico, this could be a major factor once we get out there. This will be by the end of this week. We'll be talking about it as to whether or not this could be influencing parts of the southern plains getting into the cotton belt. So I'll be watching that very carefully. Now, our current wind field right now is dominated by a larger area of higher pressure here. There's also the Bermuda high sitting in place there, and a frontal boundary that's sitting right off the coast. But a lot of action lately has been in low pressure centers that are cutting across the north interior of the United States, and we are not done with that by any stretch of the imagination. So here's the latest WPC outlook. This is on the 12Z data today. And what you've got here is that through parts of Minnesota, northern Iowa, Wisconsin, we're looking at the potential for some pretty heavy precipitation. You can see the stalled out front we talked about right in through here. And a lot of what we've got going on in the northeast, this is just leftover from Henri. But that stalled out frontal boundary could produce some locally heavy rain in parts of the southeast. We saw the scatter storms coming through parts of the eastern Corn Belt. But kind of the main show is what's coming through parts of the Canadian Prairie and what will be coming in right here into parts of the upper Midwest. Now, in the upper Midwest, of course, we've endured extremely hot and dry summer, especially Minnesota. Minnesota had its second driest July on record. And it feels as though these rains, I wish we could have had them, 2 months ago. And that would have been a much more favorable environment. But this has been our problem for the last couple of months. You see, this map goes from the 18th of June through the 13th of August. And I chose that time period for when the pattern broke over into this. And it broke into a large ridge sitting here. And that is what is really moved. In fact, you can kind of trace out the ridge. It kind of looks like a bit like an avocado there. But it's stretched across the north interior. So that's what's made this downstream area here so very hot and so very dry, and the northwest as well. And that goes without saying. We've had a deeper trough over the Hudson Bay and more troughing over the east. And this is what's helped keep much of the south, for example, on the cooler side of things. Well, I stopped this on the 13th because about a week ago we began discussing the pattern change. Now this is subtle, but take a look at the differences. Are you ready? So this is what we had in the 2 months leading up to this last week, and this is how it changed. Much deeper area of low pressure here. The ridge moved from here out into the Gulf of Alaska. And low pressure systems kind of get shot. Okay, remember, the flow around a high is like this. The flow around a low is like that, and right in the middle is where that's the direction they get pushed. And they've been riding right along the U.S.-Canada border like this, getting pulled up into this large ridge that has been building here between the Hudson Bay at times and Greenland. In fact, this is some of the warmth over Greenland, if you've heard lately in the news about some of the rainfall in Greenland. Now that pattern shift is what's absolutely critical to assess to see if it's going to stick around and continue to bring in the heavier rainfall. And so to see that, I'm going to go right to the 12Z European model run. Now what I want you all to watch with me is what keeps happening in the Pacific Northwest, because that will ultimately determine, as we watch the waves come in, how the eastern two-thirds of the country are going to respond. So as we play this forward, this is again this afternoon, getting into tomorrow afternoon and evening, now into Wednesday. We continue to see that that trough is quite dominant, and the ridge to the south of it keeps sending lower heights and lower pressure here. So this is going to keep the pattern active and cool in the northwest, and also here in the northern plains. And it's going to allow a lot of heat and very high humidity air to stretch basically from Texas all the way over here to the East Coast. And this is all the way out to Thursday. As we keep playing this forward, I do want you to take note of a couple of things. Yep, by the weekend, still tossing in troughs here. But early next week, as you saw, we're getting concerned about something possibly developing here. Now the latest, just the 12Z, a single run on the European model, does have a reflection of some sort of tropical system here, actually north of the Bay of Campeche, just fully in the Gulf. And the 12Z run, and this is just a single model run, does attempt to bring whatever that system is, right here toward the Texas coast. But still, ridge here, downstream trough. These keep just moving through the northern tier states. And what I want to say is with the pattern open and moving like this, sending these troughs in this area, well, you'll see in a few moments what that does to our next 15 days in terms of temperature and precipitation pattern. Now I'm going to stick with the single model run today. I think that it's instructive just to look at one, and then we'll kind of piece together the differences in the models in a few moments. So this is the 12Z European model, And we can see that the next wave throughout the next 30 hours or so moves right here along the U.S.-Canada border. So this is where we're going to introduce our chance for some of those larger storms and scattered storms over Illinois and Indiana. There's the stalled out frontal boundary still in place, and what's left of Henri still moving away. Those are our main precipitation events getting into tomorrow and Tuesday. What we see moving through Wisconsin and eventually into Michigan, what happens with that low. And then behind it is what I find quite interesting. Very quickly, high pressure moves in. You can start to see it right here, 1028 high. And there's general high pressure here as well. And I'm kind of drawing the lines around it because what's going to happen here if I put arrows on the end of this is we're going to start to feed that moisture around the higher pressure over the southeast into some sort of stuck boundary right in this area. All right? Because remember, the flow around these high pressure cells goes like this. So the net effect is we create lift in the atmosphere where the air collides. And it is attached to a weak frontal boundary that curls up into that low. But what you'll notice is that by Thursday morning, afternoon, and evening, you're going to see the storms squeezed or sandwiched between this high and the higher pressure over the southeast. And that's why we see late this week a lot of rain across a part of the country that has really not seen much of it at all this year. And this is going to go a long way to really help improve the soil moisture conditions, which we'll take a look at the end of this week to see how much we've improved. So this is getting through Friday morning, afternoon, and evening. So that turns into a weak low that moves through almost toward Lake Superior here. And after that, we kind of resume what we've been seeing. Here comes the next system in. A lot of scattered storms over the southeast. And here's the tail end of that front. That's connected way up to this low here, moving into the northeast. So just keeping this moving forward. This is now getting up to this upcoming Sunday. So the next low rolls in on that trough. There's its front. It's kind of daisy chained up with another system that's here in the northeast. And you'll notice as we get out there toward Monday that the latest European model is attempting to keep the next tropical low right here. Now, I'm going to repeat this. This is just what the 12Z model run is saying. The GFS takes it into Mexico. It wasn't even properly in the previous two model runs. So we'll just put a question mark, and I'm just going to let you all know that I'm going to be watching the Bay of Campeche and then into the Gulf very carefully as we get out into next week. If we just stitch all that together, though, this is what we get. Shrink that up a little bit. This is what we get in terms of total accumulated precipitation from the European model. All right. So you see a lot of scattered storms over the Mid-South and Southeast, especially right on that boundary that hits right along the coast. We're drier back into Texas and drier in the high plains, but just know it's that time of year where storms pop right off the mountains. But with systems coming in like this, as you saw, this is where we're going to get our heaviest precipitation here in the next few days. All right. From there, this is what the GFS says. And it's locked in with the European. Now, the amounts are different because they always are, but it is there. What's the one difference? That's where the European wants to take this would-be tropical system, and the GFS has it all the way down here. Now, as we do, I like to compare them both, so you're going to look at that map next. Remember, these colors represent where the European is wetter, and this shows you where the GFS is wetter, all right? So, starting with the tropical system, the European with a more northern track versus the GFS with more southern, that's one difference. Two, the European model has got a lot of precipitable water in this system coming through here, and therefore it's locally bringing in some heavier rainfall. But the GFS is wetter all the way back here to the southwest as well. And you can see just some subtle differences outside of that. But through the Canadian Prairie, a lot of folks are going to be rooting for the GFS and through this area versus what the European currently forecasts. Now, as we have been seeing into week 2, the models overall tend to agree. So by day 10, all right, let's just look at it. Ridge, downstream trough, ridge here, and a very large ridge into this area. But again, we had not seen that at all this summer. Because of that pattern and sweeping these through on open Gulf moisture and a lot of humidity in the atmosphere, it's going to be, I told my 3rd and 4th grade soccer team the other day, I said, the atmosphere is juicy, so get ready, make sure you stay hydrated because there's a lot of moisture in the air there. So look at what the GFS attempts to do with it. A lot of scattered storms. All that green is scattered storms. And as I've said many times, the model is not getting this right. The GFS is underestimating the rainfall in this area. So we see it showing up for the beginning here of September with clearly a wet tendency in the forecast. And so is the European doing the same thing? Well, got some semblance of a ridge here. There's that trough over the northwest ridge and the much larger ridge. So we'd say both models are kind of favoring the same features getting out there to day 10. And as we expected, the model is showing a lot, just a broad area in through here of thunderstorms. Now, what's going on here is that the European model, just like the GFS, isn't forecasting any major tropical systems coming in at this point. But as we anticipated, the European model is wetter in through this area than what we saw with the GFS. So that gets you that next couple of weeks here with precip. Okay, from there, what about temperatures? Oops, look, I got one slide out of order here. Oh, no, sorry. This is the last 7 days. I wanted to start with that, sorry. Our last 7 days have seen a substantial cooling in the northern plains, getting back into the northern Rockies here and into the northwest. And I wanted to illustrate to you how big of a change this was for example, for Montana. And what I want to do is I want to show you for Great Falls what their 180-day history on temperature is here and what it is on precipitation. So we're actually ready to release this to all of you by the end of this month. I'm excited to be able to do that. I'll put it out in my morning reports. But if you just notice, let's come back here. This would be the beginning of June. So right into here, there's average temperature. And you notice that the red line tells us where the highs were. And we were bumping off 100 degrees in Great Falls a lot. But take a look at the pattern shift right here. Our normal daily highs late last week collapsed down to being below the average lows. And with that trough came in some rainfall. Big event, 1.5 inch rainfall event there. After spending so much of June and much of July and August dry. So now we've recovered back up to 100% of normal on precip after going over so dry for so long. It's amazing just to think that that's how it recovered, but the drought is not broken in this area. Now, given that we did this, just a quick analysis of that major change that's happened here in Montana, let's take a look at where things are now, because it has been a while since we've seen blue on the map. And that, as you can see down here, is a frost advisory. Now, that's in the mountains, okay? It's at high elevation, but that tells you the depth of those troughs that are coming through. Meanwhile, downstream of it, we have a broad area here where we have heat advisories and excessive heat warnings right here on the Mississippi River. So this is how amplified the pattern is. Let's go out and take a look at what those temperatures are going to do in response. So Monday's maximum temperatures are shown here. And as we play this forward, we get into Tuesday and Wednesday, right? So high heat from the central plains through the eastern Corn Belt into the northeast, while the next wave of cooler air with the precip comes into the north central plains. And look, California, seeing upper 80s, low 90s in the Central Valley. That's going to feel nice after the summer they've endured. Well, there's Thursday, getting out toward Friday, Saturday, and Sunday. So we're just going to play it through. And you notice that during that time, we keep the heat on in this area, but cooler weather in place there as well. And if I just show you what we see after that, this is the 12Z European model. It once again favors the cooler pattern through here, but generally speaking, we're about 3 to 10 degrees above average, stretching from the front range of the Rockies here into the northeast. That's our pattern moving forward, all right? And how far out does it last? Well, this is now the day 10 through 15. Still, we keep the northern tier of the U.S. and the Canadian Prairie cooler with a warmer bias in the Central Plains and out here in the Great Basin and Intermountain West. That's your 15-day outlook on temperatures. Now, what I want to do next is I want to cover how much the models have changed for the month of September. So some data, new data just released here, but what you're looking at first, this would have been the forecast from the 16th of August for the month of September. Precipitation. We see a lot of just moisture in place, and I've been going over this again and again and again. Well, how did it change? Well, let's go back to the forecast from the 19th. And what we got on the 19th, this would have been last Friday, same time period, this is the whole of September. It's calling for a lot of thunderstorm activity here, a little drier on the East Coast. What did the newest run do? This just came out a little while ago. It's even got more moisture in place here for the month of September. Still drier, possibly along the coast. Now remember, these models cannot predict tropical cyclones out this far. But it just tells me that the model's refusing to shut down that moisture in this area. And that's a little bit concerning, because as we go through the month of September and then into October, our questions become, when does the midsection of the country start to dry down, and when does the wet season begin for the West? So thinking about that, I want to tell you something. The MJO, which is something I often rely on for guidance, isn't offering much. It's going to curl around here in the next few days. It's now forecast to pop out in phase 3, 4, and 5, which means it's going to go from the Indian Ocean over to being north of Australia. That generally produces more subsidence across the Pacific, which is something we've seen a lot as of late. Now, what can I do with that? Well, I said if it does end up in phase 4, what does that end up getting us? And I'll be honest with you, the composite, historical data from August, September, October is not conclusive. It actually tends to mean the pattern stays open, and we could continue to get maybe a little bit of ridging off the coast, sending systems through here, but I'm putting too much weight on this, to be honest with you. I can then say, well, what's going on with, our momentum? And while it's been coming back down a little bit, I don't really see strong signals here in the, across the polar jet stream here in the northern hemisphere to really rest my hat on and say, yeah, this is how things are going to shake down. What I am heavily relying on here is model trend. And I just want to be transparent and honest with you. I'm not seeing big signals coming from anything to tell me otherwise. So I'm going to rest on the model trend in that forecast, which is what I just showed you. From there, we are still watching for the development of this La Nina again. You got that cooler water here, but as of late, those trade winds have kind of backed off a little bit. I can show you that by just explaining that the Southern Oscillation Index has come down, back down here toward, almost below that threshold of 7. Now, it doesn't mean it's going to stay there, but if we're going to see developing La Nina, we got to get those trades strong again and bring this back up. But we don't expect, remember, this wasn't something we expected to really take hold until we get into late September, October, November, December. That's when La Ninas tend to build quite a bit. So we're still pretty far out. It's a late summer Southern Oscillation Index pattern. But what I want to stress with you as I wrap this up is that the October forecast is kind of predicated on that La Nina. What I mean is, to see wetter conditions here, that's very La Nina-ish for October. So would be the drier conditions we kind of see in this area as well. Yeah, I mean, we're just slightly on the drier side of things in this area. But there's another part of the world we're all going to start to watch very carefully. And on September 15th, when it becomes time for them to be able to plant the crop in South America, all attention is going to be put on what the precipitation pattern is going to be throughout September and October. The models have been keeping much of southern Brazil dry, despite lately some rainfall that's coming through parts of Rio Grande do Sul. But the places that plant first are in the north. And at this point, the European model, and again, this is really stuck on La Nina, says October might be wet from Mato Grosso here into the Amazon. Now, if it does come in wet like this, there will be very fast planting progress. But what I'm trying to stress here is being wet north and drier to the south means that this La Nina should get cooking fast in order to make that happen. What I tried to stress a few moments ago is that, let's see here if I can go back and find it. Yeah, there it is that it really isn't just yet. So I think this is one area we're going to watch very carefully over the coming weeks to see the progress of the La Nina and the start of the monsoon and where the drought is in place. So we'll keep talking about it and keep you informed, okay? I appreciate your attention, and we'll talk to you again on Thursday. Thank you.